Welcome to Close Watch, now a proud member of the Odd Pods Media Network. This is the show where we get to know our guests through the movies they love. I'm your host, Robert Yaniz Jr., and this is episode 27 of the podcast. I am honored to welcome Russ Robinson of Infectious Groove. How are you doing, sir?
Not too bad at all. I'm excited to be here. This is a topic, the artist in question that I have an endless amount of time to talk about. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Of course, on this show, you can find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, and other podcatchers, as well as crickettable.com. Ratings and reviews are always appreciated. We will be discussing another installment of our movie musicals. We've been doing a series on, let's see, most recently we did films like Wicked and Fiddler on the Roof, Sound of Music, Chicago, Moulin Rouge. And I wanted to switch it up. Obviously, I know you're a huge Michael Jackson fan, and I am as well. So I was like, well, if ever there was an opportunity to talk about Moonwalker from 1988, this
mhm.
would be it.
Yes,
So
sir.
you were very, very enthusiastic and very open. Like as soon as I said Moonwalker, you were like, yes.
Yeah,
When let
absolutely.
me know when I am there. So first of all, tell people a little bit about Infectious Groove, and then we'll shift over into MJ territory.
Yeah. So we have a ton of older podcast episodes that people can find us on any podcast, whatever you use for your provider. But the audio only podcast was discontinued. Geez, I think about a year ago now, but we still have like a couple hundred episodes out there. So if you do want to listen to a good time with three people talking about all things they love about music, then look those up on your provider. But what we've been focusing on lately is the YouTube channel, and by lately I mean the past four years.
Right.
Um, and the extreme short pitch on our show is we are aware that we could get far more clicks and far more attention with hot takes and uh, for lack of a better term, insulting things. And we feel like there's enough of that on the internet
Yeah.
as it is. So instead of doing five overrated albums or five of the worst singers of all time, or we don't use words like terrible, overrated, worst. All we do is we talk about things that we like, because why talk about things we don't
Yeah.
like?
Exactly.
So if you come to the YouTube channel, Infectious Groove Music YouTube channel, you will find five underrated songs by this band. Or we more recently we started a new series called What's So Great About, which we can go anywhere we want to, but like uh for example, Pink Floyd The Wall is my favorite album of all time, and so I did just a video on what's so great about Pink Floyd The Wall. Like, why
Nice.
do I think it's so great? And yeah, everything we do is just to try and focus more on, like, I really like the Hidden Gems series and stuff, because there's people who have got at us and said, "Oh man, I didn't even know that song existed by that band, and I love it," or what I mean, things like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and then if you're a big fan of a band, or an artist or whatever, a lot of times if you see one of those videos, what we find we get the most traction out of is people saying, "Oh yeah, those are five good ones, but if I were making the list, here's the five I would tell someone to listen to," or you know what I mean. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's the kind of dialogue I would like to keep going on the internet, instead of just everything, being the five worst songs ever or whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
No,
what we're doing.
that's definitely very much my approach as well. Like that's usually why I whenever I'm recruiting guests for if I'm looking for a specific movie or whatever, I'm always like, all right, well, who's a fan of this?
Mhm.
Let's I don't want to have someone on here and then spend an hour just being like, oh, what a slog this thing was and tearing it to pieces. Like
Exactly.
I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
There's enough of that out there if that's what you're looking
There
for. Yeah,
so
that's
is.
very much. Yeah. So I love that philosophy. I know you've done some Michael Jackson content on Infectious Group. Have you ever tackled Moonwalker
No, it's
specifically?
it's funny that you mentioned that, because yeah, we've done so much Michael Jackson content, from the audio show that we had, and the YouTube, with reaction videos being a thing. We do quite a few reaction videos on the channel, and we've done a lot of different Michael Jackson stuff.
Yeah.
But at no point in the history of anything that I've done content wise have we touched on Moonwalker, which is
Oh
crazy.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh
Now Lauren and I did do a reaction to the Smooth Criminal long form video, which is a big part of
yes.
Moonwalker, but we didn't do any reaction to it or anything for the actual show. And one thing too, with I used to have co-hosts on the audio podcast, and Moonwalker is not widely available.
Hmm.
like I own the European Blu-ray, but it's never even been officially released in the US, and
Right.
it's not on any streaming service, or wasn't at that time. So it wasn't like I could just say to the co-host, like, oh yeah, just rent it, or whatever. Like so that would have been one of the reasons why we never did it before.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a licensing issue or if whoever at Epic just not interested in it or what the
It's
deal is with that.
I have very hard opinions on the lack of care the Michael Jackson estate has taken with his
Yeah.
legacy, and the fact that Moonwalker isn't out in the US, I am certain has everything to do with them.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a good thing to touch on too before we get into
Mhm.
Moonwalker. How do you feel about sort of the state of his legacy? Like things have been released since his passing? I know there's been 2 albums of like sort of posthumous remixed and rearranged tracks,
Yeah.
with Escape and Michael. What are your thoughts on the kind of the products that have come out
So
since 2009?
it's interesting. The Michael album is has some major issues that were actually proven in court, where they
Yeah.
used fake vocal on I don't want to say to be on a certain number of tracks. I don't know for sure how many it was, but they were
Right.
caught red-handed doing that. But what's interesting is that album has a beautiful ballad on it called "Much Too Soon." That really is
Mhm.
Michael, and I absolutely love that song. And what's funny is I refused to listen to that record for like, geez, I don't know, 5 years or so after it came out because of all the negativity and everything. And there was
Right.
somebody on a Michael Jackson forum who convinced me to listen to Much Too Soon. He's like, you at least got to listen to this one song, and I did. And I love that song.
Yeah.
Um, and the other is Escape. Which is interesting about Escape is, um, eh, I don't mind the versions that are on Escape, excuse me. But if you seek out and listen to the original demos of any of those songs, it's one of those things where it's like Michael Jackson didn't need their help. Like he didn't need them to like overproduce those songs.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what that ended up making me do really is um seek out the original versions, and which is easy to find on YouTube or whatever, and you find out that they were better versions, right? So I don't, because I don't have that readily available, like the versions that I like better are not on streaming,
Mhm.
so I don't listen to that album as much as I would if the other versions were available.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the CD version I have has both versions. It has, like,
Mhm.
the new one and then the original version, sort of like the original versions of each of the songs
Yeah,
at the
which is
end of it.
smart.
Yeah, which is cool at least that they have that, available. Yeah, it's been rough as an MJ fan, like.
It's more about I mean, even as much as they completely screwed up the Michael album and so on, it's more about what they haven't done. Like how do you have one of the largest selling artists of all time from a sonic standpoint, and inarguably one of the greatest visual musicians, or artists of all time, and just do nothing with with
Yeah,
like how? I don't understand. And I understand. I'm sure his streaming numbers are massive. I'm sure Michael Jackson, in a dormant state, is still very lucrative for them.
yeah,
But like, even if you just look at it from that cynical of a standpoint and go, well, it's all about the money, they could be making even more if they would
right,
just
right.
re-release some stuff. So it's
Yeah,
insane.
it's very weird. What is your history with Michael Jackson? Like, what are some of your earliest memories? How has your fandom sort of developed over the years, and when did you first come across Moonwalker?
So I'm of a certain age, and I was 7 when Thriller came out.
Mhm.
And and of course now I'm very aware of the Jackson 5 and the cartoon and the variety shows and all that stuff from before. But for whatever reason, I had not heard anything of the Jacksons, or Jackson 5 or Off the Wall or anything. So for me, when Thriller started gaining steam is when I first heard of MJ. And of course, because if you live through that time, there's no way to overstate it. He was literally everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and they would do they would do whole TV specials about like just the history of the Jacksons and stuff, like just because he was that anybody would watch anything involving MJ.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got understanding what came before that. But uh the very first thing that I heard at all ever off of Thriller was Beat It. And I was blown away, because it's an amazing song.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
I was absolutely, and then the visuals that go with it. I was just absolutely stunned and blown away by that. And then um it's a much longer story, but it kind of connects into the Elvis Presley is one of my favorite artists of all time. And one of the very first albums I ever bought was Elvis at Madison Square Garden. And on that album, Elvis covers like such a range of music. Like just off the top of my head, he covers like Dusty Springfield, the Righteous Brothers, um, I'm trying to think. Creedence Clearwater Revival, Three Dog
Yeah.
Night. Like he does all this stuff, right? And that got me used to being like, hearing a ton of different types of music in one spot.
Mhm.
So that's why Thriller for me. I mean, of course, it was ridiculous selling album, but for me, what drove me to it was the diversity of music on there. Like it's not just an
Yeah.
R&B record, it's not just a pop record, it's not just a rock record. Like it's everything all at once on one record. And done very well.
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah.
So anyway, so that's where that started for me, and then went up through uh when Moonwalker came out. I want to say I first heard of it probably via MTV, because all the way through, really all the way through Dangerous, Michael Jackson was still like a big staple on MTV all the time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and so I want to say that's probably where I heard of it. What's interesting is for being as bad as either my second or third favorite album of his. Uh, but for whatever reason, I didn't even get to see the Moonwalker movie for years after it came out. Uh, but of course, the long form version of Smooth Criminal was in regular rotation on MTV like all the time. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, I've seen at least a bunch of it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh, but yeah, and so that like when Moonwalker came out, I've heard of it through MTV, but I didn't even get to see it really until, geez, I don't know, sometime in the early '90s. And for whatever reason, I never had it, and no, I didn't borrow it from anybody or anything. But it's in the early '90s. A friend of mine had a VHS copy of it, and so I finally saw it, and it was funny. Well, I mean, we'll get into the whole thing, but it was
Yeah.
the whole thing ended up being quite a bit different than I thought it was going to be based on Smooth Criminal.
It's funny that, like, so much of Michael Jackson's content to a certain point was, like, was hard to track down. Like you were saying with Moonwalker, that this was came out theatrically overseas. It went, like, straight to video essentially in the US, released by Warner Brothers, and, a company who is totally running things very smoothly these days.
Yeah, yeah, they're doing a great
Sarcasm,
job.
sarcasm.
Mhm.
Um, and then, like, with Ghosts, for example, like that I didn't see until several years later when it was billed the Michael Jackson Halloween special.
It is
Like, it's
criminal
so
that no
weird.
one in the US knows Ghosts. I
Yeah,
think Ghosts, it kills Thriller in every way possible.
really. Oh,
Yeah, I
wow.
really do. I mean, you also have the benefit of, being over a decade later and different,
Right.
he's a markedly better performer by that point. I happen to like the songs in Ghosts
Yes,
as much or
same.
more than the song Thriller. Um, and for me, um, I'm really big into the message in Ghosts.
Yeah.
Like if you, I know you and I are friends on social media. I make absolutely there's no confusion regarding my thoughts on Michael Jackson and how
Right.
the media treated him, the
Mhm.
world at large treated him, and the ridiculous things people have said about him. And the messaging in Ghosts, I think, is incredible. Like, and now I know we're gonna rank videos later. Now I'm mad that I left it off left it off my list.
I
But yeah,
actually
that was
yeah.
never even available here in the US.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I got somewhere they released it, like, on a DVD, CD, ROM kind of vibe. So I
Mhm.
have a version of Ghosts but I left it off my 6 as well because I was like, well, that's kind of a cheat. That's
Yeah.
like it's 40 minutes. There's 3 songs I think featured in it.
Yeah, there's at least 2, maybe 3. Yeah.
Yeah, Too Bad, Is It Scary, and Ghost I think are all in there.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, yep,
So I'm like, that's not fair to the
right.
rest of the
Yeah,
videos. But yeah, no, I totally would have included that as well. So Moonwalker is a little bit different than a lot of the movie musicals we've been covering. This is more of an anthology style. I feel like it's Michael Jackson trying to capture sort of that the thing that the Beatles were doing for a while, the kind of making a movie celebrating their career that's also sort of pushing it forward, where they're kind of playing themselves, kind of playing a character.
mhm.
And I think that's. Do you feel like that is a genre, an approach to a musical artist's catalog or a career that we're not really like that has kind of disappeared as of now? Because I can't remember the last time that's happened. Like if you see a music artist that's big enough for something like that, it's either a concert film or like what's really popular now, which is the concert film slash documentary kind of behind the scenes, but nothing that actually attempts to, no attempt at actual like real filmmaking, narrative
Yeah.
filmmaking.
The only thing I've seen even remotely close to that, geez, I don't know, in 20 years, is, there's a Disney Plus special, with for, Billie Eilish called, I think it's just called Happier Than Ever, or
Yeah.
Happier Than Ever in Los Angeles or something, and it's a really interesting piece where she's playing, to a crowd of no one at the Hollywood Bowl, and interspersed with it is a animated version of her that's like traveling all through Los Angeles, and like Los Angeles is extremely important to her and her story. And
Hmm.
so the animated version of her is like going around Los Angeles to those places and whatnot. And so that's at least like an original and unique way to do that type of
Yeah.
thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's and it looks fantastic too. Like it's shot so well. But yeah, I can't think of anything else. I think really what you were saying, I think eventually people just stopped being trying to be any sort of creative with it, and they were like, look, just put the songs, we'll intersperse some backstage stuff, and we'll just call that good, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The kind of movie that like the Lonely Islands pop star was parodying. It just became like that.
I love that
Essentially.
movie so much.
So do I. It's an amazing
I
movie.
get humble stuck in my head more often than I'd like to admit. Like that
Yeah.
song is so great.
It is amazing. And MJ was always really not only, speaking to what sort of transpired with his legacy, he was always such a perfectionist. So like he's rolling around somewhere being like, what are you guys doing to
I
my
know.
music? And then, he's was very hands-on, very self-aware, very sort of self-mythologizing sounds like a negative, but I don't necessarily feel like it is. Like he was very much like celebrating his journey even as
Mhm.
it was still happening. And I think Moonwalker is a great example of that, would you say?
Oh, I totally agree. And it's interesting what you said that the term you used where you said, that's probably kind of a negative. Well, again, I have extremely strong opinions on how the media treated Michael Jackson while he was here, and,
Right.
and certainly since he left. And a lot of it to me was him being like, okay, well, someone's got to do this. Like,
Yeah.
someone's got to celebrate what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Because the media
Yeah.
just was like absolutely not having it. You know what I mean? Like from before Thriller on, the media had made it clear to him that like we do not want to push you out there for whatever, for what I feel are obvious reasons. They
Hmm.
had made that clear, and I feel like at certain points in his career, he just flat out was like, "Yeah, not to have an ego about this, but what I've done is amazing, and
Yeah.
someone's going to celebrate this. Damn it!" You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And he was, obviously in this film we have probably I don't know if it's the first. It might is Leave Me Alone the first time that he's straight up like taking on those crazy rumors and expressing his feelings about the press and the media frenzy surrounding his
Yeah.
career and
Hmm.
his persona. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it's first just general thoughts I guess on this movie. This is incredibly 80s, and I mean that in the best way. Like very much the stop motion effects, the little kids in the Smooth Criminal segment. It's very Amblin-y in a lot of ways. What How do you feel that this film has aged now looking back? Obviously it's very much a product of its time, but any sort of insight now looking back on this movie, what, 37 years
Yeah.
later?
I'd rather not get into that.
Yeah,
How
well,
old it is.
yeah,
But yeah, oh, so it's funny because the other night when we were watching it, my wife had never seen it. She'd seen the Leave Me Alone video. She'd saw
yeah,
Come Together clip. She'd seen the Smooth Criminal long form, but she hadn't seen everything else. So she hadn't seen it
okay,
all as one piece. And one thing that I had remarked because I hadn't watched it in I don't know probably 5 years or so.
right,
And I thought, man, this is like really disjointed. Like this is like it just is like here's a
yeah,
thing, and here's a totally different thing, and then here's a totally different thing. But then like there's kind of a thread through some of it and not.
right,
But what's interesting is what you said. In watching it, it's just because I've been conditioned to not see anything that creative anymore.
yeah,
That's why I thought that. You know what I mean? Like there was a time where we would expect creativity and new and wild things from our artists, and we've been conditioned not to.
mhm,
And so even with hindsight, watching that again, I was like, man, this is pretty disjointed. But it's really just art. It's what it
yeah,
is. You know?
yeah, yeah. So to I guess to kind of walk people through the segments in this film. So we open with the Man in the Mirror performance, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Then there's the retrospective. There's a lot of Michael Jackson memorabilia sort of
It's
out,
just
and
killer.
it's such a great summation of his
Mhm.
career up to that point. All the highlights, like you were saying, with the Jackson Five, with the Jacksons, you get some Dancing Machine, you get some Who's Loving You, all that great stuff. Then we transition to Batter, which is with the children uh, parodying the Bad video, and this is in the same year where Weird Al Yankovic did his bad
Mhm.
parody. So I love that Michael Jackson is even kind of going back and being like, "Hey, I could parody my own video too."
Yeah. And one thing, it's a side note I want to mention on that too is
Yeah.
um it's kind of a half truth. It's very famous that Michael Jackson lent the bad set to Weird Al to make the Fat video,
Mhm.
which I think is amazing, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not only is this dude like I'm the biggest star in the world and it's totally okay to make fun of what I'm doing, but
Yeah.
like also please use my set, you know. But what most people don't know, some people know that part, but what they don't know is the batter set is different from the bad set. They had a completely different set built
Mhm.
because it's three-quarter scale
Yeah.
because of the children.
Nice.
That's the set that he lent to Weird Al, which makes the video even funnier. That's why they can't fit through the turnstiles and everything when they're in the Weird Al video. Uh,
Right.
and so they look even bigger and more like out of place because it's the three-quarter scale set. Which
That's awesome.
I think that's so awesome. But yeah, that now we'll get in. I don't know if you want to do this along the way or how you
We
want to do it.
can. We can kinda
So
do that, yeah.
one thing I was telling Lauren is that when you're this big of a star,
Mhm.
you get to a point where there's no. Like everyone around you is just yes men. In
Mhm.
and even when you're this big of a star, you end up with people like John Landis and Steven Spielberg are your yes men.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like there are so many neat little ideas in here that I wish somebody would have said, "Okay, let's take this idea and expand it to the whole thing, and then we'll do those
Mm.
other ideas in other projects or something."
Yeah. Yeah,
Do you know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Like even if like you said, look at that the retrospective part right before Batter. That could have been feature length. Like if
Absolutely.
I mean they cover what do they show 10, 15 seconds of each song, I mean
Something like that, yeah.
even feature length, like, and that's the dude's career from what age 7 or 9 to at the time, I think he would have been 30. Um,
Yeah.
you know, that or even he could have put together a whole bunch of different parodies of his own videos, and that could have been its own thing. And certainly the whole storyline with Joe Pesci and the kids being in trouble and all that, like that almost is feature length,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know. So I just wish somebody at the time would have said, "Hey, these are all awesome ideas," but like even the Speed Demon thing, there could be a whole different
Yeah.
movie based around that sketch, you know? Um, and so for me, the first, geez, I don't know, half hour of it it just seems like Michael Jackson was like, and then we could do this, and then we could do this,
Mhm.
and then and everyone in the room just went, yes, MJ, yes, MJ. Like I wish somebody would have been like, okay, yeah, we can do that in a minute. Like, let's do this other thing first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, he might not have had the opportunity to ever get back to it, and I think maybe he knew that, and so he was like, "This might be my only chance
Yeah,
to ever
that's
do
very
something
possible.
like this, so let me just put as much in there as possible." And to
Hmm.
your point, like, in the retrospective, there's 21 songs featured from Music and Me all the way to Dirty Diana, like, what is that, 18 years worth
Yeah.
of music. So yeah, almost 20 years of his stuff. And then as you sort of mentioned, the Speed Demon section, which come on, gotta love and I gotta love some claymations, some stop motion animation. And again, we get a lot of his depiction of the press, the paparazzi, obsessive fans.
Yeah, I was
You
gonna
get
say so-called fans. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And of course, we get like little references to Sylvester Stallone, Tina Turner, Pee Wee Herman, who's credited as voicing himself, which I think is really great. Which I
Hmm.
love that. Big Pee Wee's Playhouse fan over here. So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
any thoughts on the Speed Demon section? Because this is
Um,
one that always really stood out to me as
mhm.
someone who grew up with stop motion so much.
So I'm gonna go a little bit off here and then I'll come right back. So
Sure.
Phil Collins is credited with having one of my favorite quotes about Michael Jackson, which is that people always, oh, why is he always hanging around kids? Why is he always hanging around kids? And Phil Collins one time said that when adults see Michael Jackson, they see dollar signs. And when
Mhm.
children see Michael Jackson, they see a friend.
Yeah.
And I think in this, if you I may be overthinking this, but when you see the son and I'm assuming grandmother, and they see him, they go. If you notice, their faces go from like all innocent and like starstruck by whatever's happening around them, and then when they see Michael Jackson, their faces become vicious and mean. Like
Mhm.
and to me, that's to me him saying flat out, "This is how I see the way that you guys treat me."
Mhm.
Like, that's how I feel. I think that's a very conscious decision on his part, to where as soon as those people see him, they get, uh, just vicious and throw everything out the window and become and certainly, I mean, that's certainly the media people expect that of the media, but when I first saw it, I was very surprised that he was so open about going, "This is how you guys make me feel," you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I
And then
think it's
go ahead, go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead, and I'll come back
I
around.
just was gonna skip to the end of it. Every single time he gets the ticket for dancing, I laugh every time because it's like, dude,
Yeah.
the sign was right there. Why'd you do the toe stand? The sign was right there. You know?
If you had stopped just before. Yeah, and him and Spike have a little dance-off moment out there in the desert, all of that, so much fun. I think what's interesting about this, especially watching it now so far out, and, at this point in my life as an adult and supposed to watching it as a kid, you really sort of read into so much about what this movie has to say about him as an artist, about his career. But
Mhm.
what I want to know here from you, we'll get more into this when we get to Smooth Criminal and Leave Me Alone, obviously in a second. What do you think is his statement? What do you think, other than look at what I've achieved? What do you think he's trying to say with this film?
Um, Overall, I think the number one takeaway that he would have wanted people with this film to get is, uh, there's like, I'm doing my best. There's no reason to be so mean.
Mhm.
And I think he says that. I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but in many different ways throughout this film, that's what he's saying is just, there's no reason to be so mean about and of course this is a couple of years before he would find out exactly how mean the whole world could be to him.
Right.
Um and even with the main storyline through Smooth Criminal and the near the end with Joe Pesci and the whole drug empire and all that stuff. Even with that, like, he's just showing people, like, I'm just trying to help. Like, I mean, I know the storyline there is directly helping these children get away from the drug dealers, but um the overarching message to me is like, I'm just trying to help. What's so weird about that? Like,
Mhm.
what's so strange about that? Like, because anybody, whoever dealt with him on a personal level, who hasn't turned around to try and make a buck off of him, would tell people that he was genuinely confused about that his whole life. Like he genuinely was like, I don't understand why everybody thinks I'm so weird. Like this is just my life. Like none of you have gone through it, you know?
Right, exactly.
Um, and I just feel like because it ties in with what you were saying about this being the first time that he really struck out with Leave Me Alone. And I just feel like the message of the entire piece is you don't know what it's like to be me, and I don't know why you're all being so mean all the time.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting when you look at it opens with Man in the Mirror, which is literally, "Hey, let's all try and be better people,"
Mhm,
essentially. Then it's just like, "Hey, here's everything I've accomplished with the retrospective. Here's where I'm at. Here's what you know me from." And then Batter is sort of, "Look, I don't take myself too seriously." Speed Demon is sort of like, "Hey, this is how you guys treat me, and this is how you make me feel.
mhm,
Leave Me Alone" is an expansion on that. And then Smooth Criminal is sometimes I feel like I'm being hunted, sometimes I feel like an alien. I'm just out to, like, be a force for good and look out for the kids, and then literally ends the film on, "Come together
yeah,
right now." Like, so it's when you look at it holistically, you get a good sense for sort of and again, those are all messages that are present throughout his entire catalog.
mhm,
If you look at Heal the World, if you look at, Have You Seen My Childhood, like literally sort of saying some of the
mhm,
things that you were getting at. I just think it's a really interesting piece from that perspective, getting some insight into the most famous person in the world for a
mhm,
long while.
yep.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's so much about that people and again, he touches a lot on that in Ghosts too, that people will never understand. Like,
yeah,
I always tell my wife regarding the debate regarding plastic surgeries and changing of appearance or whatever. In Ghosts, I feel like he takes that on very, very head on. But
mhm,
I told my wife, I said, you know how especially in the day and age of selfies, everyone wants approval over the picture, right? Like somebody takes a selfie and they
yes,
go, oh no, 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 let me see that before you put it up, right? And they're just concerned with it going up on your social media, which in all honesty, 7 people are going to see, right?
right,
Imagine having your picture uh yeah, literally in every man, woman, and child's house and coming away from a abusive father who said awful things to you about your appearance your entire life.
mhm,
And like the way I always say it to people is my grandmother quite literally had a Michael Jackson poster in her living room. That's the how popular this guy was in the 80s. Um,
yeah,
could you even try and settle on one picture of you would want in everyone's house,
mhm,
in the world, and then would you start really focusing in on every little thing that you thought was wrong too, um, and I feel like he addresses that in this, but like you said, everything is done with a purpose as far as the messaging goes. And I think the messaging is just, hey, not even just for me, but why don't we all just be nicer to each other? You know?
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Uh and then we move on to the Smooth Criminal section, which to your point, like, add a few more songs then and like 20, 30 minutes, that could have been a feature in
Mhm.
and of itself. You get a very young Sean Lennon
Yeah.
as one of the kids.
Mhm.
Also, I wanna shout out Brandon Quinton James, who also played, like, baby Michael essentially in Batter,
Mhm.
and Kelly Parker as Katie, which, I think are perfectly fine, like, kind of innocent, cute kids. They're sort of playing in the woods, they stumble upon Joe Pesci as Mr. Big, AKA Frankie Ladeo, which I was always a little confused
Me too.
about that. Well, so, like, did he have beef with Frank DeLeo
I don't
that he
like,
would name
he
this
was
character?
yeah, he was very much his active manager at the time, and he's in the end of the movie.
I know.
Yeah, it's very strange. That's very, like, I don't know what that is. That's one thing I've always been like, "Huh, I wonder what that was all
It's like
about."
an encoded message or something
Yeah, I
about
know.
Frank
Uh,
DeLeo?
I
Yeah.
will tell you one thing, you mentioned Sean Lennon, when we were watching that the other night, my wife goes, "Hey, pause it," like, as soon as Sean Lennon showed up on the screen, I said, "Yeah." She goes, She goes, "That's John Lennon's kid." I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "And he's gonna end this by covering one of John Lennon's biggest songs." And I was like, "Yep."
Yeah.
Like, because when you're the biggest artist in the world, you can do things like that. You can be like, "Wow, you're gonna cover John Lennon? Yes, and bring me his child to be in my videos." You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty funny. Um, this section obviously also is the most narrative of the bunch. We get, like, a nice I forget how long it is exactly. It's, like, at least 45 minutes long,
Mhm.
something like that, maybe closer to an hour, and you get a lot of sci-fi elements. What do you make of this section in and of itself? And, we've often heard, I think, from Michael in the 90s, there's a lot of stories of he famously wanted to star in Spielberg's Hook. Like, he wanted to do a lot of movies. He wanted to be more on camera. What do you think of this section, sort of, I guess, as a proof of concept of Michael as the centerpiece of a film?
I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastical. Like, I can't think of another artist who would even remotely have the capacity to come up with something like this, like,
Yeah.
at all. Now, I will tell you, here's something kind of funny. So, before I ever saw the film, I owned a Sega Genesis, so I played the Moonwalker game on the Genesis, and
I
then,
remember the arcade. I
and
remember
then
at the arcade back in the
yes.
day, they had that,
I
yeah.
I I have the arcade game in my, living room actually
Nice.
now, but, but,
Awesome.
so I played that, right? So in the game, at one point in the arcade game, you turn into a robot quite often. And in the Genesis
Cool.
cartridge, there's points where you turn into the car, right? Well, having not seen the movie and only seen the long form Smooth Criminal, I was like, "What's with the robot in the car?" Like, I don't, like, why are these?
Yes.
I thought, well, okay, video game, you know what I mean? Whatever, you
Yeah.
know. And then when I finally saw the movie, I was like, "Oh, robot in the car, got it." Like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." Yeah. But, yeah, I don't think nobody else, I think, would come up with anything even remotely as fantastical and based on, imagination alone. I think that the guy proved that he very well could have been a force to reckon with in the motion picture industry. I couldn't even begin to judge. I don't have enough appreciation for film to judge his acting ability, so I wouldn't try to do that. But uh,
Yeah.
from a creative standpoint, this is another thing too that years later there are there you can find this on the internet. There's actual recordings of Michael Jackson talking about how in the late 90s he wanted to purchase Marvel. And this
Hmm.
you can full on hear him lay this all out. And what's funny is at the time they would have given Marvel away. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This well,
Yeah.
and what's interesting in this recording is he lays out his what he would do is he would release a bunch of movies one off for each individual one and make a whole universe and then
Mhm.
eventually do movies with all of them together. Like he lays out
So Kevin Feige was there going,
yeah, yeah. Well,
"What was
somebody
that
was.
again?
Yeah,
Marvel Cinematic Universe."
Yep, he
Interesting.
basically laid and he talked about how he would open theme parks around it and all that, which all of that has happened.
Yeah.
So in a way, like no one, and of course the media is not going to tell anybody about this. The No one knows that he did all of that, but like in a way, it's kind of been proven that yes, he would have been a great creative force because he
Yeah.
just came up with with the Marvel, cinematic universe.
That's crazy. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, uh, well, I mean, I'm trying to split the difference between talking about the Smooth Criminal section and also not talking about Smooth Criminal, because when we get to our rankings, that
Right,
will
right,
come up on mine. But yeah, no, I love this section. It does have that, obviously, you mentioned this thing, may how the structure of this film, and obviously, this is the one outlier that you're like, well, is it an anthology or is it this story?
right.
Like, it tries to split the difference. Like you sort of mentioned, I think Michael was just like, let's do as much as we can in this amount of time that we're
Mhm.
allotted. And so this is what we are ended up with. But this is the one that I think really sticks out to me the most because of that sequence in the club, which we'll get to, and all of that.
Mhm.
And then it concludes with "Come Together," and it is a movie unlike anything else, I think, and it has its unique place in in his career. Where do you how do you reconcile this movie with his videography, which there is, if people haven't checked it out, there's that Michael Jackson's Vision box set, the DVD set that I
Mhm.
have somewhere over here next to me. Um, where do you kind of put this in his
Hmm.
videography? This film, like overall,
That's a
how do
good
you
question.
categorize it?
Um, it's such a unique piece. It just it's so weird because it came out a couple of years after Bad, and I know it's obviously very Bad heavy.
Yes,
With like Dirty Diana was I think was the current single at the time and all that. Um, but I don't think of it as being, to me, it almost seems like a midpoint, like a different era between Bad and Dangerous to me. So, like, I have no problem thinking of it as a standalone thing, but it's at the same time, it's also such a collection of things. Um, Geez, I don't know. Hmm. That's a great question. I don't even know where I'd, rank it, like, among because it's hard like, I have no problem ranking, like, his records and things like that, but with his visual stuff, it's like, even with this, there is a standalone clip for Come Together, but it's included in this. There's obviously a standalone clip for, Smooth Criminal, and so on. Uh, and so in a way, it's just those things all gathered together,
yeah,
but I guess when you put it up against the other collections of his whole works, I would still put this above just like even there was like a 2 DVD set of called History that was like all the videos that would go along with the
yeah,
songs
yeah,
about
yeah.
history. I would put it above that for sure, even though that's more diverse in covering more of his career.
Yes.
This is just such a unique thing that I would put it above that.
Yeah, and it doesn't to I think laying it out the way we did, like what he's trying to get across with this one, it doesn't feel as disjointed to me now as it maybe wouldn't have.
That's fair,
Like
yeah.
there's a thematic connection between them, whereas a lot of the other DVD releases, and to our earlier point, they are fewer and further between than they should be, uh,
Mhm.
in the United States at least, domestically. It does feel like it is a collective work as opposed to just a compilation of one-off
Right,
excuse
no,
me, one-off
absolutely.
sort of music videos and such. And Leave Me Alone wasn't on the original version of Bad. We should
Mhm.
probably mention, like, it came out on the CD, I think, later, but like it wasn't on the album or the cassette, right? Isn't that it?
It
Because I
was
know
it
with the
was a bonus track. It was on the CD originally to, as a way to
okay,
get people to buy the CD instead of
there
the
you go.
album. Yeah, but on later pressings of the album, it was included on the vinyl rather.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was ever on the cassette or not. I'm now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever owned Bad on cassette. I've owned it on, every type of every other, thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and even now, like, what's interesting is now these days, if you just go into a record store and you buy, like a current pressing of Bad, they don't have, Leave Me Alone on it.
That's weird.
Yeah, they did like the original the current reprint, like, if you just go and order it off Amazon or you walk into Target and Bad is sitting there, it will never have Leave Me Alone on it, which is crazy. There was like a run from like 2010 to like 2020 where all of the reissues had Leave Me Alone on it, and now they don't. It's
That's
weird.
weird.
Mhm.
It's yeah, I don't like that. As a fan of that song, I'm like,
No, I
"Hey,
know,
let's not
yeah.
let's not erase it from history."
So, the one I always tell people, not that we're covering vinyl or anything, but the one I always tell people is if you're gonna buy Bad on vinyl, just bring like because I think Bad costs like 25 bucks, and for like 35 bucks, you can get the, Bad 25, which is the 3 LP version of Bad.
Mhm.
And with
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
not only do you get Leave Me Alone included on the record, but you get all the demo stuff. And the song that was supposed to be on that was in contention with being on Bad, with it was came down to Leave Me Alone and another song called Streetwalker.
Yep.
And Streetwalker is on there, and I think that song is every bit as good or better than Leave Me Alone. So that's what I
Yeah.
tell people: if you're going to spend 25 bucks on Bad, just like spend the extra 10 bucks and get the other two LPs, so you're getting the whole thing.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was like, "I think Streetwalker is the one because that's the one of the bonus tracks that always really stood out
Such
to
a
me,
jam. That is
and I
such a
was like, "Oh, good, I was glad I was right." Yeah,
yeah.
and then Come Together wasn't on any of his albums until 7, 8 years later with, History.
Yeah, it's on the second part of History,
Yeah.
and yeah, which is that overall is my favorite Michael Jackson album, and it's funny because I always have to clarify for people because they're like, "Well, yeah, but it's a greatest hits." I'm like, "Not that part." Like, the second half of it from Scream to Smile is my favorite,
Yeah.
MJ, and there's actually 2 songs on there that are, that were recorded during the Bad era, but ended up on history, come
Mhm.
together as one, and Earth Song is the other.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had
Interesting.
Earth Song done back in, I came into that information by, where I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan, and on my show years ago, I got to, uh, interview Pink Floyd's bass player, not Roger Waters, but Guy Pratt, the guy who replaced
Right.
Roger Waters on the bass, and he is the guy who played bass on Earth Song,
Oh,
and
wow.
I knew that, but I didn't know that it was recorded that long ago, and so he told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but
Huh.
yeah, it was done then. It just wasn't. It didn't go on bad, and then it didn't make obviously didn't go on Dangerous either, and then he finally put it out on History.
Interesting. Yeah, that was actually another question I was gonna ask you. What was your favorite, MJ album slash era, was? Why is it History? What is it about that specific? Because it's reactionary to everything that had happened, and it's like
A couple of different things, yeah, and that's a lot of it. Yeah, is
yeah.
you know this guy just got accused of what I feel is the worst thing you can accuse a human being of, and the court of public opinion and the media was just like, "Oh, yep, you're guilty." And my story with that, and I'll very quickly do this, when
Sure.
when that came about in 1993, I was the very first person to be like, "Oh my, this is the worst thing ever." Like, I didn't
Mhm.
even question it because I thought, "Here's this guy's always around kids. He's got all the money in the world. Like he could, wouldn't surprise me at all." And
Mhm.
then, in my opinion, in all the research that I've done, Michael Jackson is the one person, the more research you do, the more innocent he looks.
Mm.
Like when you do your own research instead of just what the media
Yeah.
tells you about him.
Right.
Everyone else on planet Earth, if you look into them, if they've ever been accused of anything, you look into it and you're like, the more you look into it, the more you're like, I should stop looking into this. Like, I'm just finding out this person's worse and worse and worse. And he's like the only guy that if you look at the facts objectively, every time you find out something new, you're like, wait, how is he more innocent now? Like, so this guy got accused of what I feel is the worst thing you can call a human being. The court of public opinion and the media just all agreed and just said, okay, yes, we all think this. Yes. Okay, cool. And the whole world turned on this dude. And then he puts out a record that addresses it head on while still keeping on his main mission his whole life, which is to continue to help everyone in the whole world and everything, like songs like Earth Song. They don't care about us are in this record as part of, like, hey, I'm still gonna be me. Like, you have done this and I'm still, like here's my side of some things, with like Tabloid Junkie and Scream, of course, and all that.
Mhm.
Um, but he's still doing what he wanted to do, not letting him deter from that. And I think with what you were talking about earlier, where Moonwalker opens with Man in the Mirror and then closes with Come Together, and how that's very purposeful.
Yeah.
History opens with Scream, uh, and gets very angry through the whole record, and then ends with a cover of Smile, which I think is
Yeah.
so calculated and brilliant. Like he's like basically at the end, he's like, listen, I'm getting treated worse than anything that's ever happened to you, and I'm still pushing through. So you should
Mm.
too. Like
Yeah.
that's what that says to me. So, and I genuinely love the songs on there, but even if the songs were terrible, the the execution of it is what makes it my favorite.
Yeah. That's the album, I think, because I'm a little bit younger than you. I was born in I was born in '83, so the one that I, like, grew up knowing as, like, a toddler was Bad, so we had the cassette of Bad,
Right on.
and I remember going on road trips and listening to that and that kinda thing, so the Bad Dangerous era is, like, when he was at his peak where, the black or white video was simulcast on multiple networks in prime
See, that's
time and all of
I
that.
know. I know you know this, of course. If
Yeah,
that's one of those, if you weren't there, you don't understand.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
there is not an artist today, including, the person who's been anointed, by the press as, like, the greatest artist of all time, Taylor Swift. I don't even have a problem with her. I have a problem with, like, the way the media
Right.
does with her. Anyways, um, they would not stop all the networks to show the same video from her at the same time.
No.
And with Michael Jackson, everybody was like, "Prime time on a Sunday? Wow, that's a, expensive, commercial hour. Wait, there's a Michael Jackson video? Yeah, no problem. We'll show that for free." You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you weren't there, you don't get that. And it's a thing that would never even come close to happening today. And so it's hard for people to wrap their brain around someone being that big.
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think going back and listening to his albums, though, to your point, I do think that History is the one that my opinion has
Mhm.
grown towards the most, because you see all the cracks. You see that this is his most personal album by a
Oh,
lot.
by a country mile. Yeah.
Like, even with songs like I already said, like Childhood or DS, which is not so thinly veiled.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's clearly not about Tom Stetton. There's no
No,
way. That's
not at all.
clearly it's not even called, it's not even called TS. It's called
Yeah,
DS. So
DS.
you've made a mistake,
Exactly.
obviously.
Exactly.
That is a bold move, by the way. That song, that is a
Yeah,
bold move. Like, Michael's like, "You know who I'm sick of? This guy." You know? Like,
yeah,
but yeah, like, and then Tabloid Junkie, of course, and then there's
yeah,
even like Little Susie
yeah.
is such a personal song to him,
Mhm.
and he's like, "I'm gonna put it on here because this is that important to me," you know?
Yeah,
And it bums me out. I know people who didn't even know that there was new songs on History until I told them
right.
there was, because it was just marketed as the greatest hits, and that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
I think that was his way of kinda Trojan horsing in all this, like, personal content and be like, "Not all of these are gonna be, like, as poppy as what you're used to from me, but you get all the other songs that you do know, and then also all this other new material as well." Because yeah, so I remember, I was 10 when the allegations arose, and that was
Yeah.
like in the midst of hard copy and all of these things that were
Oh, yeah.
everywhere. Like, so I remember seeing his sort of his statement about the commenting on it and
Oh,
all
yeah.
of that. Very much like it was really upsetting to witness in
Oh,
the
yeah.
moment, at the time,
Mhm.
and now I do feel like his legacy writ large has this, like, stain on it
Mhm.
that is it's very upsetting as someone who grew up with this guy and knows what he stood for, and that totally misrepresents,
Mhm.
everything he was about, and I think you see that in this movie, you see that
Mhm.
you hear that in his music, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a sad thing. It's a
The
sad thing.
thing that bums me out about it, and I've actually, I can't believe this, but I've had people say this to me, which is insane. I've had people say, "Oh, well, you just think he's innocent because you're a big, huge fan." And it's like, there is no song good enough to make me excuse if he
Right.
was guilty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my thing is, what I always say to people is, "Well, have you done any research on it?" And you're never going to believe this, but the answer is always no.
Yeah.
Like, I have, I've gone through 10 years of FBI files. The FBI followed this guy for 10 years when they had
Yeah.
no idea. He had no clue that he was being followed. But there were agents who started out looking into him who were like stoked, as you would be, thinking that this is a guilty person, and they were like, "Man, we're gonna bring this guy down. It's gonna be awesome. Like, he won in court, but holy cow, we're gonna take this guy down." And then by the end, they were like, "Well, shit, that's just a really sweet, kind human being." Like, what I mean? Like, there's
Yeah.
guys who
Yeah.
were involved that like started out wanting to take this dude down, and they
Right.
could. And then they walked away from it being like, well, I guess we should just close these files because this guy's not going to harm anybody ever. Um, but the roundabout way of saying that, when you say it stained his legacy, it's so upsetting to me that Billboard, Rolling Stone, or whomever can't start out a article without mentioning it, or they can't end
Mhm.
it. Its anniversary comes up of Thriller, and they do this whole big article about it, and then it's got, well, and then remember, in the time since, this, that, and the other thing was said. Like, why do
Right.
you even, what I mean? Like, why not? Why has there never been a mainstream article about, like, hey, did you know that there's all this other evidence you should look into? You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
because, and for me, and this directly ties in. I know it sounds like I'm going on a rant, but this ties into what you were talking about with.
Yeah, and to what you're saying, like, I wasn't gonna steer the conversation into this directly. It just sort of happened organically because I don't wanna necessarily be like, "So Michael Jackson, like, let's get this out of the way first before we talk about Moonwalker,"
For sure.
but yeah, we're
But
here.
when you're talking about, like, the messaging in Moonwalker, and you know what the guy stood for, right?
Yeah.
When it amazes me that people don't see that Michael Jackson stood for unity, love, equality, and being responsible for your actions.
Mhm.
None of those things benefit the media.
Yeah.
The media makes all of their money off of the exact opposite of all those things, putting harmful things out there, turning people against each other, making sure that you can making something out of nothing, and uh, trying as much as possible to keep everyone fighting all the time. Because even now, it's just about every single click you can get,
Mhm.
in any way that you can get it. So it's much more effective for them to ignore correcting the narrative on him, because it does not benefit them at all to have
Right.
people think that this person who was for all these good things could have even remotely been innocent, because that doesn't benefit them in any way, shape, or form. So why would they
Right.
bother? You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are also like, "Oh, but he settled these out of court, and why would he do that if he wa" well, because why wouldn't you just wanted to get rid of it? Like, get it
Well,
off your because then he settled a lot of the cases I know too,
so, well,
supposedly.
so here's no, here's the thing with that is, and this is one of the huge things that people don't even understand, because the number one
Yeah,
thing people always say is, "Oh, well, why did he settle with that one kid?"
right.
Because he did settle the first case. So what happened with that is they had brought a civil case first, because at the time California law allowed you to go with a civil case first. You couldn't try, you didn't have to go for a criminal trial first. Okay.
Mhm,
So they brought a civil case against him for an undisclosed amount of money. And Michael's lawyers said to him, you need to settle the civil case, because if we do your whole defense in civil court, you're going to win in civil court and you're not going to pay them any money, but then they're going to
mhm,
sue you in criminal court, and the defense or the prosecution will already have our entire case, and they will figure out how to beat you, and you will go to prison for something you didn't do. So you'll win in civil
right,
court, and you will. So he said, well, I don't want to give anybody any money, I didn't do this. And the lawyer
right.
said, yeah, but you pay to make that case go away,
Mhm,
give them the money they're asking for, and then when they go into criminal court, you'll get found not guilty, and the whole world will see this, and it'll be good. He goes, okay, cool. And it's still good advice. It's correct advice what the
yeah.
lawyers did. So he paid to have the civil suit go away, and you're never going to guess what happened. The family, once they got their money, didn't pursue criminal charges. Let me ask you this: if a pop star touched your child, is there any dollar amount that would make you not file criminal charges?
Right, exactly.
Right. And so the other cases that came about never went further, because, and that's why people say, oh, well, he paid it off. He didn't pay it off. California law changed. You had to go for criminal charges first, and then you could go get civil after. So
Mhm,
the other accusers that came forward, it never went any further, because as soon as they started in motion with the law, the courts were like, there's nothing here. Like this, we can't prosecute this case. Okay.
yeah,
The one that there was some sort of way that they were able to push it through in court was the 2003 case, and he was acquitted on all charges.
right.
So, but again,
Mhm,
nobody remembers any of this. You know
right,
what I mean?
exactly.
And it's, oh, the media narrative is always, oh, well, he paid for that case. Yeah, well, why did he pay for that case to go away? My
Mhm,
question would be, why didn't these parents look? I tell people all the time, I have Michael Jackson memorabilia in my house. I told you I have that Moonwalker cabinet in
yeah,
my living room. If Michael Jackson touched my kid, you know how much Michael Jackson memorabilia I'd have in this house?
right,
I
exactly.
would have a body part in a jar. And when people went, "What is that?" "Oh, that's Michael Jackson's hand." You know
Yeah,
what I mean? "What do you mean?"
yeah,
"Oh, no, yeah, he touched my kid, so he now no longer has a hand." Like, that's
yeah,
I there would be violence, you know?
right, right,
And there would be no dollar amount that you could give me to make that go away. So, and by the way, I should say this, because I have to stop myself from continuing to rant on this, because I'd like to get back to more of the joyful stuff to do with Michael.
right. It's
What
okay.
I've just told you, those couple of things, that's scratching the surface for how
Yeah. Oh,
innocent
I'm
this guy
sure.
is.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's just it's also people, the media or whoever, just people in general, I don't think they can conceive of the fact that his and again, he talks about it a lot in a lot of his music. His childhood was not ideal.
Mhm.
It was so he I think doesn't he didn't see anything wrong with that. Like, he was hanging out with kids, he was being friendly and hanging out and just like playing. Like, you get a scene in this movie where they're like running through the woods. There's no other adults. It's just Michael, and he's one of the kids in that way. That's he views it that innocently, and I other people can't help but see that and twist it and turn it and pervert it into something else. And I that's just upsetting to me that something that pure can get kind of twist it around
No, I
and
couldn't
used
agree more.
against. It's very when you see things like the video for childhood, which I don't know if I'm gonna put it in my six. It's like right on the outskirts because I love that video.
Mhm.
Or you see that statement in 93 that when he said, like, I've done nothing, I've done nothing but try and help people, and like, he's like getting emotional.
Yeah.
Uh, it's it's just yeah, it's we take a good thing and we snuff it out. That's
Oh,
how
absolutely. Yeah.
that's how humanity operates a lot of times, and it's a bummer.
Yeah, it's it's wildly upsetting, and that's and to bring this all full circle, that literally
Yes.
everything we just said is that's all of that is one of the reasons why remain in a constant state of just in awe of being able to put out the history album. And just being
Yeah.
able to be
Yeah.
like, because on the same record, he's like very directly addressing, well, like we said, well, certainly not Tom Sneddon, but someone with a similar name. Uh,
Right.
but then things like Scream and like his Stranger in Moscow, Childhood. But then there's still like Heal the World, or not Heal the World, Earth Song.
Or song. Yeah.
And Smile. Like the guy's just like, well, there's nothing worse that could happen to a human being than what I did, but I'm going to tell you to still smile, or
Right,
like
right,
I'm still going to care about saving the planet, that I won't even be here for, like
right.
it. But like you said, it's just that's why I end up every single time I listen to that record, I think I get more in awe of it every time I listen to it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So many great songs. Let's the reason normally for these rankings, I've been doing the 6 songs from the film, but because this film isn't so much it doesn't have as many songs as like a standard musical.
Right.
There's the retrospective and there's a few here and there. I thought, well, let's take a step back and a kind of a review his career as a whole. We've done a pretty good job of doing that so far. Lots of great songs in his catalog, obviously, but let's talk about Six.
Let's
Sure.
talk about six, baby. Let's talk about flicks and me. Let's talk about what the good films and the bad films are to me. Let's talk about six. Let's talk
That's
about six.
great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What a great song.
Um, what do you have at number 6, Russ?
Believe it or not, on this list, I have two things from Moonwalk that appear in Moonwalker, and at number six for me is Leave Me Alone. I mean,
Nice.
for the obviously, I think that what a bold video to make at that time. Like
Yeah.
just literally going, "Hey, I'm not an idiot. I see every single thing you guys say about me, and here's how insanely ridiculous all of those things look side by side by side."
Yeah, and doing it in that style as well, with all with the stop motion elements, with and tackling the Elephant Man's bones and the shrine to Liz Taylor and all the room. Like it's such a visual feast. You're just like so
Yeah,
much going
it
on.
really is something like like you said, just all the different elements going on and everything is really something. Like even the like you said, the Elephant Man, like the stop motion dancing that he's doing
Yeah,
with the elephant, any the symbolism in that where he's got the ball and chain, he's like a prisoner of what's going on, but he's still being him, like
right.
he's still, it's just incredible. And even I think the symbolism at the end, ever since the first time I saw it, I love at the very end where he just gets up and busts out of the carnival going on around him and is standing tall above everything else. I mean, what a statement, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We might hear from Leave Me Alone again on this ranking.
Right on.
So yeah, it's evaluating his career and doing a top 6 music videos was very hard
Mhm.
for me. I mean, it's my short list was like 15, just to
Yeah.
be like, well, it's going to be some of these.
Let me
So
put it
I'm
this
gonna.
way, after I got a message from you this morning, I was sitting in my office, my wife and I both work from home. She came in my
Uh-huh.
office and she goes, "What's going on?" I said, "I have to rank my top 6 Michael Jackson videos for the episode tonight." And my wife goes, "Oh my god." She was like, "No." I was like, "Yes." I'm distraught. So,
I
yeah.
so I considered a bunch of different ones. I ultimately went with Black or White for my number 6,
No, it's like that
and
was real close.
I think the reason is part of what we said earlier, that we was such a moment, and mind you, this was 91, right? Or
Mhm.
91 or 92 when that video?
92.
So I
92.
was 8 going on 9 at that
Mhm.
time. So I was like ideal age to just be like enthralled by
Mhm.
this music, by this again, another album that I had on cassette before I had it on CD. Um, it's just such a celebration of everything he's done so far. The visuals,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, you talk about taking control of a situation. Here's a
Yeah.
guy who had an autoimmune he had 2 different autoimmune diseases, by the way. He suffered from lupus and from, vitiligo.
Mhm.
Um, Here's a guy who literally tried to tell the world, "No, I have this disease, though." Like, and the world was like, "But we have decided to not believe you. We have
Right.
decided to just believe all these crazy stories instead." And he was like, "But really, though, it's," and they were like, "No, no, no, thank you. We don't want that excuse." You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
and which is it's such a painful thing, but even on his autopsy, they actually finally confirmed, yes, he wasn't lying, and he did have vitiligo his entire life. But you talk about taking control of the narrative, man. Like, oh, okay, you guys are gonna talk in the media all the time about how I used to be so black and now I'm white. Well, here comes a song called Black or White, and in the song, I'm going to turn it into, look at all of these different cultures and everything, and how we can all try and understand each other more. One of my favorite lines is in that rap in the middle of the song where he says, "I seen the bright get duller. I'm not going to spend my life being a color." Like, he's
Yeah.
like, I like, why are you guys so preoccupied with the color of my skin? Because I'm certainly not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, it's so visually done well in that video.
And then you have Macaulay Culkin, one of the world's biggest movie stars at that time. This is fresh off of Home Alone, I think going into Home Alone 2.
Mhm.
Is that Heavy D doing the rap there as well, I believe?
No, Heavy
No,
D
that's
is in
another
Jam.
one.
Heavy
That's
D's in
right.
Jam.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't.
I
I
forget
just
who did
looked
the
that up
rap
not
there.
long ago. I think it's just a studio. So it's not a famous rapper. Let me put it that way. It
Right,
does
right,
not.
right. And then obviously it's famous for the morphing sequence at the end, which people like to talk about, which still looks great. It still holds up today. I think one of the images that always stands out to me is the two babies, the white baby and the black baby sitting on the earth. That's come on.
And
That
again,
it speaks for itself.
so at the end, then the Panther sequence and everything, right?
Mhm.
And of course, the following day, what does the media choose to focus on? Not the two babies sitting on the earth, not all that. Now they're like, "Oh man, he hit a car. How dare you?" You're like, "What?" Okay, well, you guys are going to have your way with what? Like, how do you miss the 4 minutes before that?
Right.
So
And in the I think they removed it digitally in later at some point down the line, but it was also him smashing like at racial slurs, I think swastikas, things like that.
yeah,
So it's also like
because if you're gonna censor something, that's definitely what you should censor. Is
right, exactly.
good lord.
Censor what all the aggression is actually towards. Um, what do you have at number 5?
Another one that was a big TV premiere at that time, and it's also from the Dangerous LP. Remember the Time.
Nice.
That that whole thing, and for me, if you watch the very long version of it, where Eddie Murphy brings in all the people to entertain him, and it's hilarious how they all keep getting taken out of commission, for lack of a better term. Uh, and then Michael just comes in and is not concerned with entertaining Eddie Murphy at all. He's way more concerned with stealing his woman. Like,
Yeah,
and I think the dance sequence in that is so underrated. Like the group, because
yeah,
almost every MJ's videos, at least at some point, is going to have a group dance video thing
of
happening, right?
course.
I think the dance in that is so underrated. I think like
Yeah,
the
no,
way
I
he like
agree.
worked in like very common Egyptian imagery into his dancing. I thought was awesome.
I agree. Yeah, choreographed by Fatima Robinson, no relation.
Right? Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Believe it or not, no.
and one of his most star-studded videos as well with Iman and obviously Eddie Murphy, Magic Johnson, and etc. in that video. directed by John Singleton. That's the other thing. A lot of these videos were directed by like Martin Scorsese and like
I know.
Spike Lee and like real filmmakers, not just whoever happened to transition from commercials to music videos or something.
Yeah, it doesn't count as a music video in my book, but the Disney tie-in that he had with Captain EO, it's like
Yes.
okay, so who's working on that again? Well, Coppola. Oh yeah, and who else? Lucas. Oh yeah, who else? Oh, Landis. Like just those three guys. That's the only three you could drum up. You know, like
Starring who again? Who's co-starring? Oh, Angelica Houston.
yeah,
Like
that's
huge
what I
star,
said. Like
award winning, and yeah.
people, there's a phrase people always say all the time. Oh, this generation's Michael Jackson. There ain't no such thing. There ain't
No,
nobody,
there really
nobody.
isn't.
There ain't nobody who's going to accomplish a fourth of what that guy, like you said, like, oh, and who's starring in it? Well, just Angelica Houston. Why?
Right. Speaking of the Michael Jackson estate, where is like any home video release of Captain EO?
I know.
Like a lot of these things you could see on YouTube, but it's crappy quality. Like give me a
Yeah.
4K of like some of these things that are inaccessible at home.
Yep. I would for a long time after he passed, they brought it back at Disney,
Yeah.
like it was back in
Yeah.
the parks. And I thought for sure when they had when it ran its course again and they took it back out of the parks, I thought for sure there'd be a home release of it. But no.
Right. That would make sense.
Michael Jackson estate is the epitome of this is why we can't have nice things. Like
Yeah.
they're the worst.
Very much so. My number 5, I have Earth Song, which we referenced earlier. For my rankings, I was trying to go with ones like it was hard. It's hard for me, obviously, with Michael Jackson to separate the video from the song, and like some of the songs that I would re-listen to the most might not necessarily have as strong of videos as other songs on
No,
the
I get
album or
that.
whatever. Yeah. So with Earth Song, I think is a great example to listen to. I do listen to it often, but the video makes it so much stronger. Like the power in that song is even more so in the video. Just very powerful imagery. There's animals and people getting people who lost their lives in war and like landscapes destroyed. And then there's Michael Jackson, like especially when you get towards the end and he's like holding onto the trees. And this is another video that I don't think I saw when it came out.
Yeah.
It was years later when they would do like
It was an enormous hit all over planet Earth,
yeah,
except for America.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I think it's one of those that I sort of found later where they would do like a special or whatever about Michael Jackson's career, and you'd see like one shot of from this video, and I'd be like, whoa, 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 what is that? Back it up.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
was that? I didn't see that on MTV in the mid '90s.
Mhm.
Why
That's
were
how
you
I came
hiding
into
this from
that's how
me?
I came into Ghosts actually was, I can't remember, somewhere along the line, I saw something where there was and I was like, "Wait, what was that?" You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So people definitely need to search out Earth Song. I think that is an incredible video, and it's also I think a nice companion piece slash like the other side of the coin for something like Heal the World, where it's him being inspiring and trying to get call to action and this is just him just like raging out. What about
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible.
it's an amazing song. So I was like, well, that's going on there. What did you have at number 4?
Number 4 is cheating because there's 2 videos for this song, and I'm entering both at number 4. They don't care about us, and I don't care which version, the Brazil version or the prison version. I like both versions equally. They both interpret the song in completely different ways.
Yeah,
Which I think is incredible. Like, because that song itself is very, very pointed, and then to come up with 2 different visuals for the song to give it 2 completely different interpretations, I think is amazing. I like both of them just the same.
yeah, it's an incredible song and videos, both directed by Spike Lee. We should mention,
Yeah,
Spike Lee. Heard of him?
yeah, yeah. No, yeah. You might have never heard of him, but he's been pretty good
Um,
at films.
yeah, exactly. My number 4, I had "Leave Me Alone," which
Yeah,
we
there we
already
go.
touched on, and I was like, well, that's you're trying to touch your bases. You like, what did Michael Jackson stand for? He was very outspoken towards the press. He was very environmentally aware and conscious and trying to spread that message as well. So I was trying to work in some of his sort of core themes into my ranking as well. What did you have at number 3?
We've discussed this to a certain extent, but Smooth Criminal comes in, and actually, it's funny. Well, I know we'll get there. My 2 and my 1 are probably no one else's number 2 and number 1.
I'm
But
really curious.
yeah,
Yeah.
but neither of them are thriller. I'll put it that way. I don't mind thriller, but it's not in my top. But Smooth Criminal is at number 3 for me, and that's because of what we talked about earlier. Like, you know, one of the things you have to remember about the bad era is what else was going on in music at the time. And
Mhm.
I don't even like the term hair metal. I'm an enormous fan of that genre, and I don't like that term, but everyone knows that that's what was going on at that time. So your Warrant, Poison, Skid Row, Tesla, all that stuff that's what was happening on MTV. And so you have like MTV is loaded with young white guys with a hair down past their shoulders, all of them in leather, and all of them singing about women and whatever. And then the only video playing on MTV is this 20-minute gangster piece from, a black gentleman, and completely different on every single level than everything else that was going on the channel the other 23 hours of the day. You
Right.
know, it's just stunning to me. And then of course, I mean, like, if aliens came down to Earth and asked, like, what we need to know more about Michael Jackson, I would show them the lean.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
be like, this is the finest of our offerings. It's one time this guy did the lean.
Yeah, exactly. No, we'll get there. We're not done with Smooth Criminal.
All right.
Number 3, I have Scream. Uh, Michael Jackson coming on again, the mission statement of history. It's a primal scream that follows all the everything he was dealing with leading up to the release of this album. His one and only collaboration with his sister Janet Jackson, who again was also at kind of around the height of her powers around that time.
I would argue
Uh,
that, yeah.
one of the most expensive videos ever made. Looks incredible. The choreography is incredible. It's just raw emotion on display from both of them. And also just the novelty of seeing these two hugely popular entertainers
Mhm.
together on screen, inhabiting the same space. I think I was like, well, I gotta squeeze Scream in there. And I
It's
think it's
funny when you
yeah,
grow up in the world the way it was. I mean, of course, Janet and Michael are brother and sister, but at the time, you wouldn't equate it constantly. Like when you saw Janet Jackson a video or her performing at a show, you wouldn't just go, "Oh, that's Michael Jackson's sister." Like you would think of her as
right.
Janet Jackson,
Janet
right?
Jackson.
And in that video was one of the first times where I was like, "Holy crap, they're siblings." Like like I never put that together really. It's like, how much talent do you need in one family? Come on.
Exactly. It would be like now to your equivalent, there is no to your point, there is no equivalent to Michael Jackson. But like be like, what if now, you know, Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga, like they were sisters the whole time or
Right.
something. Like who are like the two biggest stars, Beyonce or something. I don't know.
No, I know what you mean.
It's yeah, it is funny. Um, what did you have at number 2?
Okay, at number 2, and again, I don't think anybody would put this up in their top, but Beat It for me is a huge thing because
Yeah.
first of all, it's the first song I ever heard by him, but the video is so um iconic. Like I again, I when I saw that in the very infancy of MTV, it was so much such a higher bar than
Mm,
anything else on the channel. Everything
yeah,
else on the channel was mostly videotaped one camera affairs for the artist, whoever, the Cars or whomever, to be standing in one spot doing their song. And then like here's Michael Jackson with this whole Hollywood production and this
right.
huge story in a 3.5 minute song about these two gangs and how, like, in the messaging behind it. And um I think that the Beat It jacket, I think, is just iconic, and
Absolutely.
the whole thing is just incredible. And one one of my favorite stories about it is that legendarily Michael invited actual gang members to the set
Mhm.
because he was like, well, the people kept saying, "No, you don't understand. Like these guys will kill each other. Like we can't have these gangs on set." And Michael was like, "Yeah, but when they get here, we'll just explain it to them that like they shouldn't be fighting anymore."
Right.
Yeah, and everybody was like, "No." Like, but in the film, there are in the short film, there are actually actual gang members in there
Yeah.
in the film because he was just like, "Yeah, but when they get here, we'll just tell them to be nice." You know?
That's great.
Well, yeah,
It
I absolutely love that film.
people underestimate the impact that Beat It, but also Billie Jean had on essentially the invention of the music video.
Mhm.
And then, my number 2, Thriller, I think sort of crystallized that, as these are not just stand in front of a camera. I was in early contention. I was considering something like Rock With You, because this is just
I had that
Michael
same.
Jackson. Yeah, this is Michael Jackson, a microphone, a camera, some lasers, in a shiny outfit, and yet he's so magnetic
Mhm.
that I was almost like, "Do I put that in my 6?" Like, I considered it for a minute, and then I was
I'm
like,
not
"Well,
kidding.
no."
I had the exact same thought. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah, it's the Thriller album, and by extension, those 2 leading into the Thriller video,
Mhm.
it changed the core. It changed the art form completely. Like, it created the modern music video, and taught artists that you don't have to just it's not just like a concert performance. There's a lot more intentionality and storytelling in it. You can dig
Mhm.
into your music, your messaging, and sort of shape your career so much through the visual side of it,
Mhm.
that it's like it's hard to imagine music now without that sort of trickle down effect that had.
Absolutely. And I would say, even though obviously music video by and large is no longer all that needed, with the way that things have gone. I know a lot of artists still do, but what you notice now is a lot of artists will do like visual companions to their album, which
Yeah,
would never have been a thing, even remotely. No one else would have even remotely thought of that unless Michael Jackson had done it first.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and even, we were mentioning some of the home video releases. There is the Dangerous, the short films, where he has basically a short film for, I think, pretty much every track on that album, more or less. Is it all of them, or it's like there might be one or two?
It's most
It
of them.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. So he kind of had that covered already. What did you have at number 1? I'm excited to hear this.
Okay, so I don't think anybody would pick this one but me, but The Way You Make Me Feel. I think the
It's a great one.
style in this video is off the charts. The way that it starts, where he's standing there and she walks by him and he looks like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you really just and the, hey, and he walks over to her, and then the acapella, "You knock me off of my feet," and the kicks in.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, holy cow, that whole it's there's so much style. And again, another completely like, if you look at the Bad era alone, his look in the Bad video, his look in Dirty Diana, his look
Mhm.
in Smooth Criminal, his look in this, they're all completely different.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I would argue no one on planet Earth could just unbutton a blue shirt and have people be like, yeah,
Ah!
and have people be like, dang, but like
Yeah,
he's just standing there in black pants and a regular blue button down shirt, and he just makes it look cool.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great pick.
I
That
don't think anybody, I don't think it's anyone else's favorite MJ video, but and of course, if you ask me this again tomorrow, I'm probably gonna have the whole different sticks and everything. But I have always loved the intro to that video. And then when it kicks off, just the whole way it's done, all fun and everything. And I like that the woman is empowered in the video as well. Like, again, at the time that came out, the women were not empowered in any other video on,
Mhm.
on MTV. And that woman in that video, he's very much in pursuit of her. It's not just, oh,
Yes.
I'm a big deal and you're gonna come to me. He's got to prove that he's good enough for her, or that she should be attracted to him. And again, no one else was doing that type of messaging at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Very true, very true. That's a great one. That was definitely one I considered as well.
Yep.
At my number 1, I do have Smooth Criminal,
Right on.
which, again, I feel like the popular choice is Thriller, as you sort of mentioned earlier. I prefer the Smooth Criminal, the night, obviously the full length. I can't stand that sped up monstrosity
I
that
know,
that
that's
they also
ridiculous.
have. It's upsetting.
It's like
I
they
just
let
refuse to watch it.
it's like they let a child at the editing software. They were like, I don't know, do this. And the kid just hit like skip frames or something, and they were like,
Right,
all right,
right.
render it. Yeah, stupid.
Especially when the pacing in that is so deliberate. The coin goes across into the jukebox. It's I have been known to wear fedoras, and I feel like it started because of this. It's
Oh,
it's
I'm certain
because
of
of
it.
Smooth
Yeah, that's
Criminal.
mhm.
It's it is so much to do with his style in this video, the choreography that, like we mentioned, when the lights go down and like, Henny, are you okay? And it builds up again, which is
So rad.
such a way to take things down and then build it up stronger than before. Builds up into the lean, if I
Oh
remember
yeah, yeah,
correctly.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
and one other thing too is, and this bums me out so much because I'm such a music collector. There is an extra line in the video version of Smooth Criminal that's not on the album. There's in the second verse, it starts with an extra line that's not on the album version of the song,
Uh-huh.
and you cannot get that version anywhere except for the video. It does not exist on a cassette single, on a 7-inch single, on a 12-inch remix. I have been all over the world looking for this. It does not exist. And
Jeez.
it's so minor. It's one extra line that starts the second verse instead of
Yeah.
uh and the literally the only place to hear it is in the video version of the
Wow.
and I don't even know why that line was cut from the album or anything. I don't know. And I mean, there's other things in the video that I understand why they're done. Like for example, there's when he's up in the by the pool table and stuff. There's like a it breaks down to just an instrumental version of the song, so you can hear like what's going on and him breaking the
Right.
ball and all that stuff. So like I
Yeah.
understand that stuff, but like I don't understand why there's one extra line in the because it doesn't the line doesn't even have to do with the narrative of the video or anything. It's but it bums me out to no end that you cannot just like it's not on streaming. It's never been on any release. Like they could release that as just that song as a 7-inch with that line, and I would pay like $25 for it because I just it's always bummed me out that I can't get that version. But yeah,
Yeah. It's as pitch perfect as an MJ video has ever been, in my opinion. Like the it's also very playful. Like
hmm
there's so much like he goes up there, he's like breaking up a fight, he's flipping the guy with the knife, he's like briefly romancing a girl, then he's the guy is sneaking up on him, he takes the gun out and shoots him, he
I know.
goes very cartoon style through the
Yeah,
wall,
like very
and then
Looney
my
Tunes.
and then Michael dances over and it's like puts his head down and like shakes his
Yeah, you're like,
finger
well,
at him. So good.
yeah,
Then that shot when he goes right into when he's like, "You've been hit by a smooth," and the camera from above, smooth criminal, right
oh, yep.
into it. Oh, amazing.
And even
All
that
of
when
that.
I told my wife that we live in a very suburban area, but I said if we ever end up living in any sort of high rise, when he takes the fire escape thing and he like
Yeah.
does this like dancing, I told her, I said, if we ever live that, I'm going to exit the house that way every single time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The
Oh,
other shot that I love, and this is so tiny, but I think it's after the whole lean and everything and he's got full control of the situation now because he's done everything you just said. He's taken care of all the bad people in there, and now he's got everybody in the room outside. And he looks up, and you can see the kids looking down from outside, looking at
yeah.
him, and he just quickly like winks at him and nods his hat, like
Yep.
I got this. I love that shot of him. I think that's
So good.
so cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's like to the point that we're talking about it, and now, especially now that you mentioned that extra line, and I'm like, I need to make sure I double check
Mhm.
what Russ is saying because now I wanna rewatch it again. It's in a career that is littered with an embarrassment of riches when it comes to his short films, his music videos. It again feels reductive to call these music videos
Yeah.
because there's so much artistry, style, and intentionality behind it
Mhm.
that it's not just like, oh, let's just smatter it together, we'll shoot it in a day or two. It's like there's a lot there's a lot more involved here.
You know,
To
it's funny
the
that
yeah,
this goes way back to what you were talking about earlier with like the reverential or the self-celebration. Kurt Loder used to constantly make fun of the fact that Michael Jackson would call his videos short films. Like Kurt Loder would just be like, "Oh yeah, oh I'm sorry, short films," which I love Kurt Loder, but it used to crack me up how smug he would
yeah,
get about MJ. Um, but like my thing is Michael was like, no, these literally are short films though. It's
yeah,
not like he was just making music videos like everyone else was. And he's like, well, you have to call mine short films. Like, no, he was literally making short films. Like the names
yeah,
we talked about earlier, like the names that you're using to make these are short films.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Did you have any honorable mentions that you wanted to run out? Because I had lots,
All of the rest of them. like
pretty
I
much.
yeah, I told Lauren the first thing this morning when you said the six, I was like, can I just say all of it? Is 1
All
through
of the
6?
above.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, there's like I can't even think of Like there's like one Michael, like I don't love the visual representation for human nature. Like that's kind of like a
Yeah.
really cheaply made
Yeah.
stop motion thing that obviously the record label did without, him being involved, I'm guessing. Uh but like that's about the only one I can think of.
I
That,
think
like,
I think he spent all of what they would have given him for a music video budget for Thriller.
yeah,
I
I know.
think that's what it is. Because that they had first of all, obviously Billie Jean and Beat It were on my honorable mentions. Uh Thriller is what it was, and then the next album for Bad, we get Moonwalker plus lots of other videos that are not even included in this from that
You know what I
album.
think is a hidden gem, both as a song and a video from Bad, is Liberian Girl.
Yeah.
I love that song so much. And I think the video is brilliant,
Yeah.
where it's every relevant star at the time, literally everyone. If you starred in something that year, or if you put an album out, you're in that video. And
Mhm.
what I like is, again, Michael's messaging in that all of these stars are all arguing with each other over their ego. Oh no, Michael called me. I'm supposed to be the big part of this. And then at the end of the video, you find out he's just been watching them making an ass of themselves the whole time. I just love that, and of course, and it's the only time ever that Weird Al ever appeared in an actual Michael Jackson video, which
That's
is
true. That's yeah, very true.
yeah.
Bad, the video itself also was on my honorable mentions. Speed Demon, Childhood, Remember the Time. And then normally at the end of these episodes, I especially with the musicals at least, I've been asking people like, "Oh, what would if you were gonna, what would you kind of suggest to other people who have, how would you sell this film on them? One, and then two, what other films like would you recommend?" I think the easy recommend here is Ghosts, because
No, yeah, far and away.
chances are nobody's seen that. If you want to watch a less than perfect version of it, it is on YouTube. I mean, if it's that's the only way you can see it,
I
I
will
guess
say
watch that. But
I don't know. Again, this is, well, I was gonna say I don't know why they do this, but I'm talking about the Michael Jackson estate, so no one knows about
right,
it or anything. I will
right,
say
exactly.
this: that around Halloween every year, and I don't know why they take it off, but around Halloween every year they put it up in 4K on Michael's YouTube channel.
Oh, interesting.
So keep an eye for that, because it'll just appear around, like, I don't know, a week before Halloween, and then it's usually on his channel for like I don't know, like a week after Halloween, and that's far and away the best you're ever going to see it. I mean, it looks gorgeous. Um, but again, they do that and don't even tell anyone. Like, it's insane to me. But I always push very hard every year for that one. Because everyone says, "Oh, it's Thriller season," which is another thing. Michael Jackson's got
Yeah,
a whole
yeah,
damn season named after him. Uh,
exactly.
but I always tell people, I'm like, "Listen, I know Thriller is your childhood. I know it's nostalgic. I know it's amazing. But like, one of these years, take a look at Ghosts also, or instead
Yeah.
of, because I think the messaging in Ghosts is something that more people should look at.
Hmm.
It's specific to Michael Jackson, um, and so every year, and you'll see, because again, we're friends on social media. You will see when we get to October, nearly every day I will be like, "You guys should watch Ghosts today, though." So
Yeah, directed by Stan Winston, and it's just it's let's see, directed by Stan Winston, co-written by Stephen King. Heard of him?
yeah, I know. Well,
And Mick Garris. It's also like it's another one of those wildly like dream collaborations that they
mhm,
managed to pull off, and the effects look really cool, and Michael love to transform himself and does so in this multiple times.
yeah,
It's
and I
incredible.
not to be spoiler, he's playing the main antagonist in this too, right? Yeah, which
Yes. Oh, 100%.
a lot of people don't know that. Like, I've had people watch it and then ask them if they thought there was anything weird about the antagonist. They're like, "No, why?" And I said, "Well, that's Michael Jackson." And they're like,
Yeah.
"What?" Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's even footage of him, like,
Oh
being
yeah.
put in the prosthetics and everything, so yeah, it's great stuff.
My wife and I
Uh
always joke about it too. We're always like, "Oh, really? Weird Al put on a fat suit, so then Michael Jackson had to." Another
uh,
example of Weird Al ripping off Michael Jackson ripping off Weird Al.
exactly. Um, no, this was a lot of fun. I think one last question, like, how do you think that Moonwalker captures his legacy as an artist? Like, what do you how I guess going back to what I was saying, how would you pitch this on someone that hasn't seen Moonwalker. They're like, yeah, I know Michael Jackson's music. I've seen some of the main videos, Thriller obviously among them. But what is Moonwalker about? Because I also feel like because this hasn't gotten a domestic release, a lot of even moderate to large Michael Jackson fans probably don't even know that this exists,
Right.
or haven't seen it.
Mhm. Well, I'll tell you what I told my wife about it because she had never seen it before last week. I said, what you're about to see is a lot of really, really good ideas and uh, not as much. It's not as cohesive as you're probably used to. But and then here's the important part, and this is what directly answers your question. I was like, overall, you're going to see what Michael Jackson was about,
Mhm.
which is, I think, really this like the whole thing, like, it was what you said earlier, with the way it starts with Man in the Mirror, it ends with, Come Together, and then in the middle is like, "Here's how I got here," and, and then here's what I'm at the time currently dealing with, and then also in the middle of all of that, here's this completely fantastical, far more creative thing than anyone else is putting out, in the middle of it. So to me, it's just, I would tell people, like, if you wanna get an idea of what he was about, at that time, then this is the way to go.
Yeah. And then casually drops in Smooth Criminal the best music video, the best short film of his career.
Yeah, just
Just
as
like,
like,
just yeah,
also
might as
this.
well throw it in the middle there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Russ, this was so much fun. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen.
Right on, yeah, I'm
Tell
glad.
Thanks for coming on. Tell people where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, all of our social media is all just Infectious Groove Music. So what I just tell people is, like, whatever your social media platform is, if you just go to Google and type in Infectious Groove Music, whatever, Twitter or Facebook or whatever, it'll come up with ours is the only thing out there with a remotely similar name. It'll come back. What I tell people is, we would love it if you would come subscribe to the YouTube channel, not just to go, I want a bigger subscriber number, but the dialogue that we have with people about trying to bring up uh, underrated songs and hidden gems and things like that matters more to me than anything. So,
Mhm.
like, uh, you know, I would prefer it if most people just go to YouTube, type in Infectious Group Music, hit the subscribe button. We have 3 videos every week, so I feel like they're bite sized. They're always like 5-10 minute videos. Um,
Yeah.
and what I always tell people is, if you subscribe to the channel because you are a big fan of one artist or another that we've covered, um, you know, look into some of the other artists that we've covered that you may have never heard of, because I guarantee you, you're gonna hear something that you're like, oh wow, I would have never known of this, without.
Right. Exactly.
So that was my thing, is just go to YouTube, type in Infectious Group Music. Um, you get a reaction every Saturday, which is I feel like it's the least amount of work for content, but they're very fun to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then we have vinyl review every week, and then on Thursday is the one that's we have the most fun with, which is the music topic videos, where we try and talk up music we think needs more talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the channel. I love the philosophy behind the content, like we said at the top of the show. I love that you're trying to push the positivity and celebrating what you love. There's enough negativity and hate out there these days, especially. It's like,
Hmm.
let's just why? For what purpose? Why add to this? We have enough of that. You're not doing yourself or anyone else any favors by bringing everybody down. Um, so
Yeah, I just
definitely
don't.
go support Russ and Infectious Groove. Meanwhile, you can find more episodes like this wherever you get your podcasts and on crookedtable.com. Show your support on Patreon at patreon.com/crookedtable. Or if you want to keep up with us on social media, that'll be at Crooked Table on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. We'll be back next episode with the final installment of our movie musical series. But for now, that's a wrap on another Crooked Table production. Keep watching, everybody.